Hi, everyone. Is it a good evening or good afternoon? It doesn't look like anybody from the other camp is here. I don't feel them. You know, my sixth sense is accurate, like I can detect them. I wish that they showed up. And actually, I'm a little bit disappointed that where is the faculty? Where are the students? Especially that I am not an expert on the topic. I'm just an eyewitness who has a life experience, spent half of my life among what's so-called Palestinians. And I will tell you later why I say what's so-called Palestinians. And half of my life with the Jewish people in two underground organizations, Hamas. The fact that you could be a Hamas member, but you would not understand Hamas operation. And it's like a pyramid. A handful of people understand the function of the movement. It's a very secretive organization. Even Israel, after many years fighting against Hamas, they cannot understand totally how Hamas functions. So, but this is my natural environment. I saw Hamas being established in our living room. Then I saw the Hamas evolution, 36 years building momentum that brought us to the October 7 events. On the other hand, I was part of the Israeli intelligence, and many people hold this against me. They say, okay, you are an Israeli agent, meaning that I don't qualify to talk on the topic. Not honoring 10 years of counter-terrorism effort to stop suicide bombing attacks. So today when I speak on the authority of the eyewitness. Many people from the other camp have been trying to discredit me, to cancel me, and they want to silence me somehow. And I say, well, how come you're protesting against the eyewitness? Like usually people protest against an establishment, against government, against politicians, religious authorities, but an eyewitness? And we don't have many eyewitnesses who came from Hamas to tell us what's going on. So the easy thing for this type of people to just try to shut me down and continue in their denial. Hence, I insist on speaking. And to these people who think that this is a conspiracy, that someone can come just from Ramallah and fool the Jewish people and the Zionists and create a career out of it. What they think? People are stupid? I have credentials. More 27 years of relationship with the Jewish people around the world, fighting on a regular basis. Only God knows what we had to go through during the Second Palestinian Intifada, when Hamas targeted civilians indiscriminately. They did not differentiate between Arab and Jew. They did not differentiate between children, women, elders. American students were killed. Some of us remember the Hebrew University attack. 6 Americans were killed on campus. And I was dealing, by the way, with the group that sent the suicide bomber. The mastermind behind it was Ibrahim Hamid. He's in Israeli prison today. A very good friends with Sinwar, the Hamas leader, the current Hamas leader in Gaza. And Sinwar wants Ibrahim and hundreds of other prisoners to be released in exchange for the innocent hostages who have been kidnapped from their backyards. But I wish that the tragedy ended there. It's unfortunate that we have among us people who never been there, who don't understand the root cause of the conflict, are posing as the saviors of the Palestinians. Hence, they need the victim. They need more victims so they can maintain their status, their righteousness. They hold the higher moral ground. And now they want to tell me, they want to tell Israel, they want to accuse us of being genocidal. Even though I have been warning the world for more than 15 years that Hamas is a very dangerous organization. And I had to go against my family. I had to lose all my security, my comfort, to bring the message to the world that Hamas had been up to something really bad. But people, the majority, are in denial. They did not want to face the truth, and now they insist on their denial. And of course, we don't see it only on the streets of Gaza. We see it in London, we see it in Paris, we see it in New York, and we saw it on this campus at Harvard. And truly, many of us have been shocked because this is Harvard. Could be the highest educational institution out there. And people assume that the students have high IQ, they're very smart, and they cannot fall in the trap of delusion. But now the students of Harvard, at least some of them, proved to be the opposite of all the expectations. To me, this is not shocking. You know why? Back in the 90s, the top student in Birzeit University, this is the best university in the Palestinian territories, Birzeit University, where I was born, in that town. It's a Christian university. And the smartest student, let's say, with the greatest grades over the years, his name was Yahya Ayyash. Yahya Ayyash was Hamas member who was studying electric engineering at Birzeit University. And he was able to develop homemade bombs based on his education. Eventually, Yahya Ayyash was responsible for the death of hundreds of Israelis, mostly civilians. And that's the most educated person from that university. Look at the Hamas leaders. Most of them are doctors and engineers. So, was it with education? What's the problem? How can you be well-educated but adapt to violence and violent ideologies? My personal opinion, there is a big difference between education and intelligence. So you can be well-educated, but without being anchored in a certain truth or having a moral compass. Then automatically you could be swayed by any ideology, and all of a sudden you believe that blowing up buses, beaches, universities is part of the resistance. And of course, I don't have a problem with the students who have been protesting against war. But being anti-war is something. Being pro-peace is something else. And to demonize an ethnic group without actually knowing these people in favor of savages, by the name of resistance, by the name of occupation, by the name of apartheid, all the allegations that the BDS, and I'm sure some of you know what's that movement, they have been working for many years trying to delegitimize Israel, the only democracy in the region. And of course, I don't want to speak too much of Israel, because many people think I'm advocating on behalf of Israel, as much as I'm just trying to make the comparison between the only democracy under consistent terrorist threat for the past 70 years, pretty much since its establishment, and a culture that has been praising death, a culture that has been sacrificing children for political and financial gain. And I think this is where most people don't understand, because here in America or in the West, it's beyond anyone's imagination that a parent would agree that their child would die as a martyr for the cause, or for Allah, or for a religion, or any hypothetical entity, is something beyond our understanding. But this is the culture. And this is the time that we need to accept that there are people among us who still live in the 7th century mentality, that have been weaponizing civilians, have been weaponizing children to achieve their goals. And this is exactly what we are witnessing in Gaza. But the tragedy did not start only since October 7th. Take, for example, my situation. When my father had to choose between the Palestinian cause and his own son. And by the way, my relationship with my father was excellent. I loved him, he loved me. We were best friends. But when he had to choose between his God, the cause, or his oldest son, even though I saved his life, I sacrificed my life for his. I took care of the family when he wasn't there. And I took responsibility towards myself, most importantly. And all I tried to do, just stop the madness by doing something suicidal when I went against the tribe and the tribal interest. Because to go against the main narrative of the Palestinian revolution means death sentence. And to try to stop a suicide bomber in a society where the majority of the people agree that it's a virtue to kill and get killed for the cause. When I went against the current of the society, I became immediately a traitor. And that means death sentence. This is how serious this offense. So I did everything within my ability to stop the madness. For those who don't understand what it really meant, the suicide bombing attacks, okay? The footage of every suicide bombing scene would come to me first, within 5 to 15 minutes after the suicide bombing attack. Because part of my work was to identify the bombers, to see who he is, with what village he came from, who sent him, so we could make the connection fast enough before the next one reached their target. Now, open your imagination. How many suicide bombing attacks freshly I had to see the scene on a regular basis for about 10 years. And the photos just kept coming, identifying something that could not be identified. This is just a small part of the mad world that I had to deal with, while what so-called leaders of the revolution were sitting in luxury, expecting from the children to go to the checkpoints and die, gambling with children's blood, gambling with the generation's future for political gain. So I fought against that. Wouldn't you? And I have to say, if you step into my shoes for a moment, you realize that that was death. Because I didn't know I would make it outside of the region to begin with. I'm very lucky to be here to talk about it. I could have been caught 100 times. And death was just dancing around the corner every moment of my life. And this is why it saddens me for so many people when I come here with such credentials, fighting a deadly fight. I'm not saying I was the only one fighting. There's so many unknown soldiers, warriors who have been fighting every day to protect civilians from terrorism. It doesn't matter what name they adapt. So I tried to do my best, but that was not enough. It was not enough for my father. It's not enough for the people to realize that targeting civilians indiscriminately can only lead to destruction. And it was very, very scary to see, or like to be in a city, in a town, where the majority of people agree on such a thing, believing that the suicide bomber is going to heaven, free ticket to heaven. And all those who have been killed, they're just going to hell. Anyway, it's my struggle, and I cannot just reveal all of it in a one speech. But today it's my moral responsibility to speak about it, at least to reduce my human experience into a two-dimensional language that cannot even defend itself, where people can take even things out of the context and manipulate and invert the narrative. From October 7, Hamas and Palestinians, by the way, I don't differentiate. Hamas is just one branch of the Palestinian violent ideology. They committed the genocide on October 7. And within no time, they inverted the narrative, then became the victims of a genocide. Perpetrators in the morning and victims in the evening. That brings us back to the victim, or brings us to the point of the victim mentality, which is a disease. In my opinion, the question of Palestine needs to be studied not as a historical problem, more as a psychological problem. Because the symptoms of Palestine or Palestinian are connected to a mental problem. Dependent, entitled, angry. If he's not compensated, if feels has the right to take revenge, has the right to adapt to violence, to kidnap, to loot, and all the things that we've been witnessing for 70 years, not to mention hijacking commercial airlines, blowing up airplanes on the runway, killing athletes, kidnapping diplomats. All has been done by the name of Palestine. So what is Palestine? Well, is it an ethnic group? Is it a human race? Is it a nation? What is Palestine? Before we protest on behalf of Palestine, do we know what we are talking about? I grew up believing that Palestine was a country, then it was occupied by Israel. And we were under occupation. And it was our duty to fight until we emancipate or liberate our country. But in history, Palestine never existed. And this is the very foundation of the Palestinian narrative. And by the way, yes, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people around the world believe in something that never existed. It's a historical fact. And when you ask them the question, they are in denial. They don't want to even address it or answer the question. Because Palestine is nothing but a colonial entity created by the British that lasted approximately 25 years. And today, millions around the world want to bring the colonial entity back to life at the expense of well-established and well-developed country, the only democracy in the region that has all ethnic groups in it. Muslims, Arabs, Jews, Druze, Christians, all live in Israel in harmony as equal citizens. And Palestine is nothing but a violent ideology. But many want to represent it as a country that has been occupied, and the conflict is a dispute over land. And I think this is the lie of the entire Palestinian narrative. And this is the responsibility for educational institutions to actually shed light on this matter. Because, okay, the students are confused. This is totally understandable. They're driven by very strong emotions when they see the bloodshed on social media, even though many of it was fabricated by Hamas, even though Hamas' strategy has been to sacrifice civilians. But let's say that we don't understand the Hamas evil game, but at least what's the responsibility of the faculty, of the administration, when we have such complicated situation and people are driven by very strong emotions? And what about the facts? So everybody is saying free Palestine, but free Palestine from what? How can I free Palestine if it had never been occupied? Something does not exist. And what is Palestinian? So they want it for free. They want free, like I supposed to create Palestine for them and give it to them for free. Otherwise, they're going to come after me. This mentality, the victim mentality that is entitled for compensation and for revenge if I don't meet with their expectations, this is very dangerous. So all the allegations of occupation, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, genocide, apartheid, they are baseless. They are baseless, but many hurry to accuse. They want to accuse Israel and bring Israel to the international courts of justice to just keep Israel as a suspect without having the evidence. Even when the judge says that what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide, they choose to put the words in the judge's mouth and say it's a plausible genocide. And we simply say define genocide. Because what happened on October 7, people were killed based on their ethnic and religious backgrounds. What's happening in Gaza is a collateral damage, totally different story. Most of the victims are the result of the use of human shields. And if the anti-war activists don't like to see what they are seeing, then they must protest against Hamas, who have been using human shields. But none of them protested against Hamas. The vast majority have been protesting against Israel. Well, how can you advocate on behalf of the children and validate the Hamas and the Palestinian ideology? That is nothing but a false narrative. Then they come and say apartheid. We say simply, we have 2 million Arabs who have equal rights and less responsibility, by the way, because they are not obligated to serve in the army. So where did they come from? The 2 million people who live in Israel freely. And by the way, they have been plotting terrorist attacks against Israel from within, betraying Israel and betraying their neighbors, betraying their country in the time of war. But Israel still does not punish the Arabs within the country as a collective punishment. But the world chooses not to see that Israel has been fighting on multiple fronts, dealing with savages, with terrorists, with genocide. And it's very easy to just blame Israel. This is what they've been doing. They think that they have the higher moral ground, as I personally want the children to die. We have been saying this for many years. There is no one in Israel that wants to see any Palestinian child being killed or harmed. How many children came from Gaza into the Israeli hospitals, even children of terrorists, like Ismail Haniyeh, the late Hamas president. His children used to go to an Israeli hospital. And Israel did not say, okay, this is a terrorist, we are not going to help his children. Even Sinwar himself had a brain surgery in Israel during his imprisonment. Today we have terrorists. Not today, 2 days ago, who stabbed and injured and killed 8 people. It was taken to an Israeli hospital and received a treatment just like any other victim. But these are the standards of Israel. And what about the standards of the other society, what so-called Palestinians, who voted for Hamas, who celebrated the attacks on October 7 in the thousands and tens of thousands? And even if they don't support Hamas, they don't accept Israel's right to exist. But many of us choose to believe that this is a fight over land. And we tell them, no, this is more of a clash of values. Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups have been activated by dictatorships like Iran or the Islamic Revolution leadership. They have been moving their proxies against the Western values, against Israel, against the United States. So we can continue to go in our denial, not choosing to see things for what they are, not to see the religious dimension of this conflict, the Jewish hatred rooted in Islam. And this is where it gets very tricky, because I don't know where your college gets its funding from. But so this is where, the leadership begin to compromise. And they don't want us to talk about religious hatred that is rooted in the scripture, that people have been acting upon it. 1400 years of Islamic attempt to dehumanize the Jewish people. And by the way, find me one religion that describe other religions by the name. By the name. In Judaism, you may find some violent scripture that was affiliated with the beginning of Judaism, but he will not find anything referring to another religious minority outside of Judaism. But in Islam, the Quran points out the Jewish people. They are mentioned some 42 times, and not in a nice way. So I said, if Allah hates the Jewish people, how can we expect from the Muslim people to love the Jews? And of course, we don't want to start a religious war. It has been a religious conflict, and we want to solve the problem without turning it into a global situation. But are they retreating? And when I say they, I mean the vast majority of the Muslims who have launched a global assault against the Jewish people since the beginning of the war. It was not enough that the Jewish people suffered a modern-day Holocaust on October 7, the worst since the Holocaust. That ignited the bloodlust in the Muslim world. They wanted more. They celebrated it. They have been celebrating, and they will continue to celebrate. They did not have even respect. Just a few days ago, we had the anniversary of October 7, and they insist on celebrating the day as a triumph. It's as a victory for the Muslim nation, inflicting pain on other religious groups. And this is where, it comes my responsibility as a free thinker, as someone who lived in that culture, to say, it's my moral responsibility to talk about it. Because this religious hatred must come to an end. And without talking about it freely, then will continue forever. So we need to answer, what is Palestine? Did it ever exist? And what actually the Muslims want from the Jewish people? There's some scripture out there from the most trusted Islamic sources. And I myself went to a Sharia school that actually make a condition, the killing of the Jewish people for the end time, for the judgment day. That the judgment day will not happen until the Muslims kill the Jews wherever they find them, until the stone and the tree would call a Muslim warrior and tell him, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. This is Muhammad. This is not Bin Laden, this is not Hamas leaders, this is Muhammad. And this is believed by the vast majority of Muslims and Muslim seculars, that is legitimate sayings of the Prophet. Well, this is very dangerous. If the Muslim people, a vast majority, a majority religion, has been bullying a religious minority and want them dead as a condition for the Messiah or the Mahdi of the Muslims to come back. This is very, very dangerous belief. And of course, when we talk about it, I'm immediately labeled as Islamophobic. So they want us to be silent, be afraid to criticize religion, even though it's my birth religion and it's my birthright to criticize it, especially in relation to ongoing violence that we don't know how it's going to end. So they want even to take my right to criticize my birth religion by nonsense labels like Islamophobia. I don't even know what is that. And this is very controversial, but it's a very important dimension of this conflict, the more we ignore the ideological dimension of it, the problem is going to grow bigger. So, what is the solution? And I say simply, this is up to the Palestinians. The Palestinians need to decide what they want. Do they want a Palestinian state? Or they want to insist on destroying the state of Israel? Two different things. They want a free Palestine that the rest of the world is supposed to create for them and tell them, this is your Palestine, take it, and it's for free. Don't they say, like on a regular basis, free Palestine? They want free stuff. Don't they? So they need to decide, because Israel came about after so much work. So much work. It's not easy to build a nation. It's much easier to build a revolution and create chaos and cause bloodshed than weaponize civilians, then pretend to be the victim as they continue to carry more terrorist attacks, insisting on the same strategy of targeting civilians. Then there will never be Palestine. And I'm afraid after 70 years of terrorizing the state of Israel and the Jewish people, Israel has the right today to decide whether if they want actually to have such neighbors. And by the way, the situation could even get a lot worse than this. So, before delegitimizing Israel, Palestinians must prove their legitimacy. Israel has 5,000 years of an evolution in that region, with overwhelming evidence, artifacts, archaeology, history, Holy Scripture. Even though their coin, you will find a shekel that is 5,000 years old. And today it's still the shekel. The temple is there, and the mosque is built on the top of it. But who came first? So for the majority in that region to demonize Israel and to continue delegitimizing Israel and to continue this nonsense propaganda that Israel stole the land, that Israel is an occupying force, colonizers, invaders. This has taken us nowhere. What we need to actually address, and the truth that needs to come to the world, that Palestine never existed. And for Israel, when they legitimized the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, back in 1993, it was on a one condition: to drop violence and to come to the negotiating table. But instead of doing that, the Palestinian Authority dedicated most of its energy to delegitimize Israel. How can you be a peace partner, but in the meantime, you want to cancel your counterpart's right to exist? Just think about the budget and the madness. The Palestinian Authority, the European Union, the United States, other donors for billions of dollars. How do they spend their budget? The majority of their budget is spent globally, outside of the territories, on diplomats, embassies, media, to delegitimize Israel. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on their operation outside, while the children of Gaza and the West Bank drown in poverty and despair. Their game is global. They have not been investing the money inside, in education, in infrastructure. They are the most corrupt revolution who just been working around the clock to spread false narrative. All of it baseless. All these like 5 major allegations that I mentioned earlier, all of them are baseless. Palestine is non-existential. The Palestinian ideology, whether if it's Hamas, Fatah, or the rest of the gangs that have failed to elect a legitimate leadership, a legitimate representative. But then they want to blame everything on Israel and demonize Israel. So they can get the global status as the troublemakers, where everybody, that includes the American government, the European Union, that they try to just silence the Palestinian terror by paying them off. And what I say from this very important podium, is it that important? That money is the root cause of this problem. The more money you give these criminals, the more they insist on sacrificing children. This is their game. They want to sit in luxury, and they're reckless. They are willing to sacrifice everybody for their political and financial gain. So governments around the world need to stop giving the Palestinian leadership money. They have been committing a crime against my brothers and sisters. This is the reality, the way I view it. I'm a child of that conflict. I did not understand why the children were dying during the first Palestinian Intifada. I did not have the power of discernment. I witnessed so much bloodshed, more than you can imagine. The pictures that you see on the social media is nothing in comparison to what I witnessed during the first Intifada as a child. I was only 10 years old, and I lived next to a cemetery. And all the victims of the clashes of the first Intifada were buried just next door. I mourned with their mothers, with their sisters, with their families. Countless. Every day were coming. Sometimes we had 5 to 10 bodies buried just next door. And today, I don't have the authority even to speak about it. And simply I say, stop giving these people money. They are criminals. They have no cause. Their revolution has no moral compass. It can go for eternity. So many times I describe it as a black hole that you cannot satisfy it. The more you give it, the more aggressive, the more violent it becomes. It can swallow up an entire galaxy. Then, back to the solution. Why don't the what's so-called Palestinians agree on a leadership? In order for Israel to make peace with what's so-called Palestinians, well, we need to have a legitimate leader that we can negotiate with. Not negotiate some terms with Hamas and other terms with the Islamic Jihad and other terms with the Public Front and other terms with the Palestinian Authority. And each one of them wants something different. But they all agree on destroying Israel in part of the land or in the entire land. So the generous, supposedly moderate Palestinian leadership agree on dismantling Israel in half of the land. That's the peacemaker. The problem, they come in late, some 70 years. They had their opportunity in 1948 to establish an Arab state. There was no Palestine then. An Arab state. next to the Jewish state. Israel declared their independence in 1948, but the Arabs declared war against Israel in 1948. And they launched 6 or 7 major wars trying to annihilate the state of Israel and the Jewish people. 40 years later, they remembered to declare their independence in 1988, 40 years later, when Yasser Arafat declared his independence. And when they asked him, who is Palestinian? He said, the Palestinian is any Palestinian wherever they are. And he forgot even to define the borders of Palestine. Anarchy, a revolution that does not have any compass, does not have any goal. Violence for the sake of violence. The more violence they commit, the more recognition the world has been given them. And we say, stop, enough with the victim mentality. And also, many here in the West, they don't realize the crime that they are committing. Because when they say free Palestine, and who's supposed to do the job? Free Palestine, or from the river to the sea, or maybe just part of that land, means that someone has to go on a suicidal fight with Israel to remove Israel from the land as a condition to establish Palestine. And who's going to do this job? Me? The children of Gaza? The children in the West Bank? Supposed to actually fight on behalf of the egomaniacs, playing the savior, so they can make a point, or for their movement to become successful. This is not acceptable. Enough children dying. And by the way, they're not only Arab children who have been dying, also Jewish children. Hamas in the morning killed Jewish children for revenge, to inflict pain on the Jewish people. And in the evening, they killed Arab children for propaganda. So to portray them as a resistance movement, this is going against all our effort that we have been trying to do to stop this madness by the name of Palestine. And if I have to choose between the children and their future, or a political ideology that is going nowhere, that is proven to reach a dead end, October 7 was a dead end. And instead of the Palestinians being ashamed of themselves, like that actually some of them committed the genocide of the century, and humbly say, this does not represent us, if they just tried the minimum to differentiate themselves and say, you know what, we are against what's so-called occupation, but at least we don't agree with beheading children and burning and raping and looting and destroying every form of life for those who did not watch Hamas atrocities on October 7th. And I was cursed to see the footage that the public did not see. It continues to be my curse. So how long this is going to continue? Okay, Palestine, they had their opportunity. How many times they had the opportunity? It stands only for their failure. And they come after 70 years of failure, of repeating the same mistake, with a new level of blame, escaping the responsibility, that they not even have the honesty, the integrity to just differentiate themselves, at least of what happened on October 7, which, that's it. From that point on, I don't see a difference between Hamas and Palestine. So, the picture that I'm portraying is a very dark one. But we must understand that this is the reality, and it's a very ugly reality. And honestly, the responsibility is on the Palestinians. That they must stop this game of blaming and trying to live in the past. Today we are in 21st century, trying to create recreate the opportunity that they missed back in 1948. It may not happen because it's very similar to reversing the wheel of time. Nobody has that capacity. We are the children of today. And if they need economy, if they need infrastructure, if they need education, I think this is a very good investment. And the world has been very generous if it was not for the thieves, for the corrupt revolutionary leaders who have been stealing the money. Then the world can contribute towards that. We have the Vatican, does not have any political borders, yet one of the most powerful countries in the world. The Palestinians had that opportunity when Israel was willing to give them East Jerusalem. That includes Temple Mount. They had that opportunity, but Yasser Arafat, for some reason that I don't understand, rejected, taking half of Jerusalem. Was a very generous offer. I cannot believe that Israel was willing at some point to actually divide Jerusalem and split it in half with the Palestinians. But Yasser Arafat still rejected that. A Palestinian state on the 1967 borders. So, we must focus on the most important thing, the new generation. The old guard of what's so-called Palestine, Palestinians, or their ideologies, whether if it's communists or Islamists or nationalists, I don't care. We need to find a mechanism to protect the new generation from staying in this vicious cycle of violence, because it could go for eternity. We need to cut the chain. If it means no Palestine for the next 10 years, that on suspension, focus on the children, focus on education, focus on the economy. Then, if the what's so-called Palestinians prove their responsibility, that they show responsibility, they want equal rights, but they don't want to take responsibility. That's a fundamental problem. Once they show the responsibility, then we may talk about a Palestinian state. But a Palestinian state on the rubble of the state of Israel, this is not acceptable. And it's wrong. And it's totally rejected. Because the only democracy in the Middle East, the only light, the only hope that we have in an ocean of dictatorships, many forces have been unifying to destroy and to delegitimize. And we're not going to allow this to happen. Palestine is a possibility, but first, they must get legitimacy. And they must drop the violent approach. With this, I conclude my speech and I open it for Q&A if any of you have any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mosab. Perhaps what we could do, very quick 15 minutes of questions, and then if you could just reiterate the question once it's asked for our recording, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for all the work you do. In your opinion, what's the percentage of the Gaza population that sees the blame should be on Hamas for causing this versus the quote-unquote attack?
We don't have any statistics regarding to this problem. And I tell you, the vast majority of the Gazans, they hate Israel blindly without knowing what Israel is. Even though Israel helped the Gazan economy, they employed tens of thousands of Gazans. They all betrayed Israel on October 7th day. And when I say, I mean the vast majority. I'm sure there are like a handful of people out there who don't agree, but they're afraid. But also being afraid and being hypocrite in such times, the vast majority may not agree with, the vast majority agree with Hamas. Not everybody is agreeing with Hamas, but you could say everybody agree on their hatred towards Israel, and this is what really matters right now.
So Hamas, at least the way I understand it, the goal is destruction of Israel. But when you were listening to conversations in your house, listening to the Hamas leaders, was there ever any discussion of like, okay, if we accomplish this, then what? Or were there any other goals, or is it purely destruction? What is the movement about?
This is the problem that the world is not able to see. That if they had, let's say, a final agenda, a final goal of what can satisfy their political ambition, then we can try. And this is one of the reasons why I question the belief system behind them. In a culture that wants to dominate the world. Okay. This sounds a bit strange, and I'm trying not to go too far because out of respect to the podium and to the campus. But Hamas want to dominate the globe. It's a Nazi ideology. They want literally to establish an Islamic state on the rubble of the state of Israel. Then they wanted to expand to establish a global state. The Muslims tried this in the past. It's a fallen model. We have 24 of Islamic khilafas that by the means of the sword tried to spread their ideology, their religion. They succeeded, but eventually it became a bloodbath and it was a dead end, and they collapsed. They repeated that model again and again and again throughout the Islamic history, for those who studied the Islamic history. I would tell them, how many times you want to try to kill the diversity of life, to cancel other races, other ethnic groups, other religions, and become the dominant religion. And if you succeed in your goal, what are your guarantees that it's going to work for everybody? In principle, this Islamic approach is against the way of evolution and the way of life that depends on diversity. But it's almost impossible to rationalize. Like, I was not able to rationalize this even to my father in a very friendly conversation. Even if I was able to convince him, he has so much to lose. Like many other Muslims, like many other Muslim leaders, they have so much to lose. So today they are on a quest, not only to destroy the state of Israel, and this is why we say the religious dimension of it, we must all be aware. This is why I'm here to create the awareness. This is not indoctrination. This is not like trying to justify Israel's position against what's so-called Palestinians. This is not my job. It's just the awareness. Because I see it creeping on everybody. And many of the students today, they think it's a dispute over the land. So they end up validating and justifying violence. What they don't understand, by justifying violence there, they invite it here. And as someone who lived the first Intifada, it was very romantic. I heard it from the river to the sea, people wearing keffiyas, protesting in the streets, and it was like it felt like a great cause that finally the people are revolting against the occupation. We did it. Within no time, it became bloodshed, became mass shooting, suicide bombing, stabbing, checkpoints everywhere. People lost their trust in everybody. We used to have the Jewish people come to our town. We used to go to their cities. We never had a checkpoint. Things were just perfect. Then everything changed to the worse, and it continued changing to the worse. So if we don't counter it, even though it's not a very popular idea, but we must fight against this before it spreads like a virus and takes over. I wish it was only Israel and Palestine. I think we have a problem, an Islamic problem. And as long as the Muslims really think that they have the solution for the human condition, that if they are able to establish one global state with one Islamic leader, only one, a ruler, and before that we will not be able to reach absolute justice, then they will continue to try. And by the time we get there, it would be a total destruction. Maybe just the annihilation of our civilization, the same way it happened to even more advanced civilizations in the past, if there was such a thing. And by the way, the free fall of today is very, very dangerous, because you don't know how fast everything could collapse. The collapse of society, the collapse of civilization, the collapse of economy. We are all related, and it's, I don't want to say it's shocking for me to see Americans and to see Westerners who are actually buying into this ideology. And I know it's a dead end. This is why I don't want to say I'm panicked, but at least, like, you see the level of passion I speak, because I know it's a dead end. And they have been saying, globalize the intifada, globalize it, and say, no, don't globalize it, localize it. You know, that's like the last thing I want to happen. Anyway, so we will see. Time will answer your question. Yes, please.
Practical question. If I'm at one of these free Palestine demonstrations and I'm able to talk to one of them, and I don't have an hour at the podium like you have, I have maybe a minute or two before I lose their attention. What should I focus on?
You know, ask them, what makes you a Palestinian?
I see them talking to a non-Palestinians who are sympathizing. What should I focus on to get them to re-examine their views?
Listen, you cannot rationalize with people who already made up their mind. I had so many debates with people who never been there, who tried to attack me like immediately and delegitimize me. And I simply said, why don't you move there? And not as a form of punishment. You know, in order to learn about any culture, you must spend time with the people. You need a minimum of 10 years to be among the people, to understand their mentality before you advocate on behalf of their ideology. So first of all, you would suggest to them, move there, live with the people, see their mentality, see if you still like them after 1 month, or maybe after 1 day. So I hope that this could be a good one. Please.
One is that what's going on here is a redefinition of things. Right? And what intifada is completely different from other actions. It's the big peacemaker perspective of the anti-war movements way back to be a part of the big thing.
Right.
It seems to me that one of the ways is to help people see that difference in their positions. Because as long as they believe that intifada is this righteous social justice cause, so I don't know if maybe that, like, how would you, is there information out there other than somebody who's lived with it, like you have, to show people in a way that they can see that what it's actually about is not what it's
Yeah, it makes sense. Of course, many of the youngsters, they want change, they want fast change. So everybody has different meaning when they say intifada, the word intifada. But what they are not aware of, the wolf among the sheep. Those are the ones who are actually rigid in their indoctrination, in their belief, and they are determined. They know exactly what they are doing, and they are enjoying the chaos they are creating and the division. Of course, it's but what these people don't understand, that now life is perfect the way it is. I don't know if it's out of boredom or out of emptiness or void that they are seeking revolution. I read somewhere that by misery they seek revolution, And by revolution, they're led back to misery. And there's so many people today in the, especially the youngsters, looks like that there is void in their life, and they're looking for a cause, something to participate in. But what I tell them, prior to the first Intifada, I'm sorry for the long answer. It's a very important one. As I said, things were very, very peaceful. Nobody bothered us. You know, we lived in our house. Those who had paper to their house, nobody came to them and said, get out of your house, I want to take this. Jewish families used to come to our house. I remember my father serving them some special Middle Eastern dishes. And it was for the first time I had my encounter with the Jewish people coming into our house. Especially the women did not dress, etc. So I just kept looking, you know, but at least like they were in our house. My father was very excited. This is a Hamas leader, you know, and we're talking a few months before the first Palestinian Intifada started. When they wrote the charter, I don't think they were aware completely of October 7, how it's going to look like. They wrote it with the intention, freeing the land. It's a great cause, isn't it? From the occupiers. It was a fantasy. And the difference between theory and practice. The distance is about 36 years. But I challenged my father to even look at some of the footage that I saw from October 7th. If there is any seed, like the amount of a mustard seed of humanity is still in his heart, he would break. And it's very, very different than just the collateral damage, seeing buildings collapsed on people. Because this is determined, and evil was just there. They had a choice to spare a child, and they did it. So to just see that today they chant Intifada, Intifada. It sounds very romantic, but the outcome could be destructive. And you know who is going to lose? All those youngsters will be the ones who lose. But they will continue blaming until they turn everything into Gaza. Because if you look at the Palestinian mentality, the victim mentality, from the beginning of they never stopped for a moment and said, we've been doing it wrong, let's change strategy. Instead, they just blamed Israel. And every time they faced the new failure or the new defeat, they called it genocide or ethnic cleansing. They never admitted actually defeat. Look throughout the Palestinian history, they call it Nakba, catastrophe. They don't want to call it a defeat, that we fought, we started the war, then we got defeated. It's shameful. And their culture does not accept that shame. So, and now today they see Gaza a rubble. That's the manifestation of their violence. But do you think they stop there? It's just like, that was wrong. We brought this upon ourselves. Let's not do the same in the West Bank. Let's not do the same in Lebanon. Let's not do the same in Iran. Instead of that, no, they insist on the same strategy and on the same evil to get global sympathy. So those sympathizers are validating, they have been validating the Palestinian ideology. And I hope that I will not live to witness a global intifada. You know what a global intifada literally means? Even though many people are not even aware of the concept, it means World War III. This is what it means, and I hope we don't live to see that.
I think we have to cut off at this point. I'm very, very sorry. Well, thank you, Mosab.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.